Well, now for the reaction here at home. Joining us is the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Good morning to you, Prime Minister.
Good morning, Lisa.
Shocking news from Brussels this morning. An Islamic State has claimed responsibility. Your reaction?
Australians condemn these cowardly attacks in Brussels, and the people of Belgium have our thoughts and our prayers are with them, but above all, our most resolute solidarity. We are utterly united, completely united, in the fight against terrorism, in the fight against this sort of cowardly violence.
So far, the toll is 34 dead, around 100 injured. Do you know if any Australians have been caught up in the attacks?
I've spoken with our ambassador in Brussels this morning, and so far we are not aware of any Australians being involved. But it is very early days. Brussels is a big international city, and there are a lot of foreigners there at any time. The Malbec railway station, for example, is only 1.5 kilometres from our embassy, and our embassy personnel use it regularly. The ambassador has confirmed that the embassy community is all safe and accounted for, but our embassy personnel are in touch with all of the hospitals and, of course, the Belgian police and prosecuting authorities to find out details of any other Australians that may have been involved. But at this stage, we are not aware of any Australians being involved.
All right. Well, Australian airports are, of course, going to be extremely busy heading into the Easter long weekend. Are you going to increase security in light of what's happened in Brussels?
I've had a discussion this morning, Lisa, with the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police, the Acting Director-General of ASIO, our counter-terrorism coordinator, the Attorney-General and other officials, and the ASIO's advice is that there is no requirement to increase the threat level. We already have which is at probable, this is a threat level of a terrorist incident. We already have a very high level of security at airports. It's important to recognise that while we have a lot to learn from incidents like this, and I've asked the coordinator of counter-terrorism, Greg Moriarty, to again convene the heads of the relevant agencies to ensure that we focus on what's happened in Belgium and learn from it. We learn a lot from all of these incidents wherever they occur in the world. But having said that, we are in a much stronger position from a security point of view than Brussels, than the Europeans are. The reality is, of course, that we have the benefits of geography. We have much stronger control over our borders, as Australians are very aware. Our borders are secure because we have secured them. In Europe, of course, there is effectively no internal borders, and their external borders are anything but secure, and we've been seeing that unfolding tragedy on our television screens for some time now. We have a very focused intelligence operation to prevent terrorist attacks, and there have been 6 disruptions of terrorist operations here in Australia recently, and you would have seen, people would have noticed arrests and very recent announcements of arrests here. So we are very focused on it, but Lisa, we cannot be remotely complacent. This is a real risk. The government is we do everything we can, as do state governments, everything we can to keep Australians safe, but of course there can be no guarantees.
Just on that issue of security at our airports over the weekend, there are due to be strikes at airports around the country by Border Force workers tomorrow. That's got to be a major security concern. How can you assure Australian holidaymakers with those strikes going on that they're going to be safe?
Well, I've discussed that matter with the Commissioner, Andrew Colvin, this morning, and there will be no change. The strikes do not affect the Australian Federal Police presence at the airport.
So exactly the same?
The AFP will be there in force. Absolutely. The AFP presence will be as strong and consistent as it always is, and the AFP are not affected by the strikes.
So what about the border security people that are going on strike?
Well, I can assure you that the AFP has that in hand, and the AFP's security levels at the airport, the commitment of personnel their operational awareness and so forth is consistent.
So you will be...
So travellers can... sorry?
So you'll have the same number of people with the same level of training in force, despite the fact that Border Force is going on strike tomorrow?
There will be obviously a strike affecting the immigration personnel, the Border Force personnel, but the Australian Federal Police, who are of course primarily responsible for the security at airports, they are the they are the security agency charged to protect these federal responsibilities like airports. They will be there in force, in the operating at full strength.
All right, OK. Well, as we speak, the grandmother of terrorist Khaled Sharif's children is in the Middle East trying to bring them back to Australia from Syria. If she is successful in finding them, are you going to let those children back into the country?
Well, this is a matter that's under active consideration at the moment, but we'll wait to see what emerges. Wherein the grandmother should not be travelling to those areas. I have to say, we understand her compassion, but she is the Australians that travel to those designated areas in Syria and Iraq are breaking the law.
So how do you feel about those children who are Australian citizens coming back, knowing what they've seen and knowing what they've done?
Well, I'm not sure how much the children, which children you took. Obviously, their particular role depends on their age, Lisa. But just generally, obviously, these children have been taken to a war zone irresponsibly by their parents. Their parents have broken the law in taking them there and going there themselves. And obviously, every Australian, every parent, every grandparent is filled with compassion for the circumstances of those children. But clearly, we have to put first and foremost the security of Australia.
When will you make a decision on those children?
Well, when we are liaising with the relevant authorities, Lisa, and as soon as we are aware of where they are, what the situation is, we can then make an assessment. But I can just say to you that we are going to put, as we always do, the safety and security of Australians first. I can assure you that is our primary duty, and we understand the human dimension here very keenly. We really do. All of us do. But the first and most important thing for us to consider is the security and safety of all Australians, all 24 million Australians. And we secure this country. As I said, we know that there is always the risk of a terrorist attack, and that's why the threat level is set at probable. So we can't guarantee that there will not be terrorist incidents in Australia, obviously not. But every sinew of government is directed at ensuring that Australians are safe. So we do everything we can. Border protection, secure borders, policing, intelligence, disruption, working with our friends and allies, working with other countries, working in due course, as well we have been to date, but we'll be working more intensely with the Belgian authorities to learn from those incidents. I can assure you there are thousands of Australians in our security services working night and day to keep Australians safe, and that is our priority.
Just on that, Prime Minister, looking at the pictures that have emerged out of Brussels this morning, there is one particular picture that shows what's suspected to be two of the suicide bombers. They haven't moved through security yet. They're just in the general area, and they each have a single glove on each hand. Would you like to see much stronger security this side of the security gates, because that sort of behaviour detection is something that could have alerted authorities, because it's believed that under those gloves could have been detonation devices?
Well, there is a very I don't want to go into operational matters, and I'm glad you've raised this obviously, but I don't want to go into operational matters or techniques. But I discussed this very matter with the question of security in the departures hall, essentially, of the airport before you go through airport security formally. I discussed this with the Australian Federal Police Commissioner this morning, And we do have, as you know, there is a police presence there. There is a very close attention paid to people coming and going, and that will continue. But, of course, as you know, we learn from every one of these incidents, wherever they occur in the world, we learn a lot, and it enables us to be more alert.
All right, well, let's move on to the coming election, whenever that is. Have you spoken to Tony Abbott since he claimed you were running on his record of government?
No, I have not, no.
Why would you not speak to him? I mean, despite his promise of no sniping from the sidelines, he is proving to be a very dark shadow hanging over your shoulder, particularly leading up to the election. Isn't it time you had some strong words with him?
Well, Lisa, I think the Australian people are focused on the choice at the election, which will be later this year, very likely on the 2nd of July if the Senate does not pass these very important laws to bring the rule of law back into the construction industry and ensure that unions are run accountably and transparently. If the Senate doesn't pass those important economic reforms, then yes, there will be an election on the 2nd of July. And the choice then will be between me and Bill Shorten. And the question will be, who is best able to continue to manage Australia's transition from an economy that has been fuelled by the mining construction boom to one that is more diverse, that is based on open markets, on innovation, on more investment, enterprise, entrepreneurship. That's going to be the question. And we have laid out a very clear economic plan for enabling us to do that. Mr Shorten's measures, unfortunately, that he's proposed will absolutely stand in the way of further investment and jobs.
The problem is there does appear to be deep divisions within the coalition government, and it is a case of we've kind of seen this movie before. We saw it with the Rudd-Gillard government, and Australia rejected them out of hand, and it is looking like the coalition is not a combined force at this stage. So I'm wondering, when are you going to speak to Tony Abbott to try and improve the way the coalition is looking at the moment?
Well, Lisa, you're interested in my predecessor. The Australian people are interested in the choice between me and Bill Shorten.
Well, no,
there are only
your
two
predecessor
options,
is interested in showing that there are deep divisions within the government at the moment.
Well, that is simply not the case. That is not the case, and the remarks you refer to would suggest the contrary. The fact is that the government is working in a completely united and focused way on delivering the economic reforms and the economic management that will ensure we continue successfully to make this transition. And we should not sell ourselves short, Lisa. We have strong economic growth, stronger than any country in the G7, well above the OECD average, 3% real in the December quarter, 300,000 jobs created last year. Australia was meant to be flat on its back after the mining boom subsided, but our economy is driving ahead. And why is that happening? It is because of our focus on innovation, our focus on greater productivity, our focus on the opening of big markets in Asia, which has been so important, of course, for education, for tourism, and of course for agriculture, for all those soft commodities. So we're seeing that, but we can't be complacent. So we have to work harder, and that is why we are proposing further reforms and further changes. And you see, with the bills that are the subject of the disagreement with the Senate, what you see there are measures that will ensure that our construction industry, which employs over 1 million Australians, will be more efficient and more lawful. Okay. And the consequence will be that we will have more construction and more jobs in construction, and that's good.
All right, Prime Minister, I mean, you talk about a united government, and I think Australia would love to see that, but just earlier this week, I mean, we saw that, the Treasurer didn't even know that he was having to bring down the budget a week earlier. Why didn't you bring him in on that change of date? It's very embarrassing for him.
Well, I think look, can I say to you, I work very, very closely with the Treasurer.
But that would indicate the opposite, Prime Minister.
Well, if you just let me finish, Lisa, the Treasurer was well aware, as were the members of our leadership group, that we were considering and were likely, very likely in fact, to ask the Governor-General to call the Parliament back on the 18th of April, and if we did that, obviously the budget would have to come back a week early. So there is no question that the Treasurer was absolutely in the loop. The timing of when I went out to Government House was that timing decision was taken on Sunday, and I went out there in the morning. And what the Treasurer said on the radio in the morning was accurate. The budget was set for the 10th of May until such time as I changed the schedule. So, you know, a budget can't be on 2 nights. And
okay,
so
but you couldn't make a phone call to him when you made that decision
it was on the
Sunday
10th.
night?
Well, the fact of the matter, Lisa, was that that was considered. The decision was taken on Sunday night. It was a decision for me to take as Prime Minister, but my leadership group knew that decision, that trip to Government House was very likely to occur, and it was just a question of when it occurred.
So Scott Morrison was not alerted on Sunday night that you were likely to make that decision on the Monday?
Well, I did not call Scott Morrison on Sunday night. No, I did not. It was a very small circle. I spent the evening, the bulk of my time with my ministerial colleagues was obviously spent with the Attorney-General, who provided the advice.
Scott Morrison is not in that small inner circle.
Scott Morrison was fully aware of the likelihood of the budget coming back to the 3rd of May. He was fully aware that we were, once the Senate reform bills were passed, that we would be seeking to bring the Parliament back by proroguing Parliament and summoning it back at an earlier date to ensure that it had the time to consider the industrial bills that I've talked about a moment ago.
All right, Prime Minister, we will have to leave it there. It is a very busy day and we do appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Lisa.
Thanks.